Man, this tale I've got to tell you is totally wild. My wife, Maris, floated the idea of us trying an LT marriage, living apart together, and then she ended up second-guessing that plan when her sister started catching feelings for me. I'm Aldric, 37 years old, just a regular guy, and I've got to spill the beans about this absolutely bonkers mess that's been shaking up my life lately. So, I've been hitched to Maris, she's 34, for close to 9 years now, and we've been a team for 11 years total, raising two incredible girls, ages 8 and 6. Honestly, I figured our life was pretty steady, Sure, we weren't all lovey-dovey like newlyweds anymore, but after 9 years and a couple of kids, that's pretty standard, right? We had our typical married couple rhythm going. Every now and then, we'd bicker over silly little things, like me forgetting to stash my work boots somewhere besides the living room or her going a bit overboard with the Amazon orders, but it was never anything huge. I've got a solid gig in construction management, started out swinging a hammer, climbed the ladder over time, and now I bring home a decent paycheck. Maris has got this corporate job she seems to enjoy, and 4 years back, we snagged ourselves a house. Our daughters are thriving at school, acing their classes and all. We even added a furry buddy to the family, a dog, last year, pretty much nailing that classic American dream vibe. Looking back, though, I probably should have caught a few hints that something was brewing. Lately, Maris has been acting different, more upbeat, almost glowing, and way more into her job than before. She used to just unload about work like it was a chore, griping about endless meetings that went nowhere or coworkers who got under her skin, stuff we've all been through, right? But recently, she's been chatting about her job like it's some thrilling adventure. And then there's Evan, her boss. At first, he was just this random name she'd drop here and there when she'd tell me about her day. She'd say stuff like, "Evan cracked the funniest joke in our meeting today," or "Evan came up with this brilliant idea that totally turned the project around, nothing too out of the ordinary." But then things started shifting a little. She'd toss his name into conversations in these casual, off-the-cuff ways that didn't seem like a big deal back then. But now they're flashing in my memory like bright warning signs. Like one time, we were chatting about how bosses handle their teams, and she goes, "You ought to hear Evan's take on leadership. It's honestly pretty motivating." Or another day, I was poking fun at all those cheesy corporate buzzwords, and she jumped in quick with, "Evan says those phrases really help pull the team together." Huh, that sure sounded like something she'd come up with herself. I remember chuckling one night and saying, "Geez, it's like Evan is your work husband or something," just teasing her. Nothing serious. She paused for a split second, barely noticeable, then let out this awkward laugh and brushed it off with, "Oh, come on, he's just a really solid minner." All right, that was a little odd, but I let it slide. Fast forward to me lounging on the couch, halfway through a YouTube tutorial on fixing our creaky garage door, when Maris strolled in. She had this vibe about her, like she'd been mulling something over for ages and finally mustered up the guts to spit it out. I glanced at her, half-focused, and asked, "Everything okay? Kids good? Your folks all right?" I was already distracted, figuring it was just some random life update. Yeah, everyone's fine," she replied, shifting from one foot to the other like she couldn't quite settle into the moment. Then she hit me with it. I've got something I need to talk to you about. It's been on my mind." I hit pause on the video, gave her my full attention, and said, "All right, what's going on?" She let out a big breath and went, "I've been thinking, maybe we should try living apart together. Still married, but in separate places, splitting time with the kids." I blinked at her, totally thrown. "Living apart? What now?" "Yeah," she said, "it's a thing some couples do." I just sat there, staring, waiting for her to crack a smile or say she was pulling my leg. Nope, she was dead serious. I had to pause my garage door video and everything, half wondering if I'd inhaled too many cleaning fumes earlier and was imagining this whole thing. Here's the kicker, that morning had been totally normal. We ate breakfast as a family. I helped the girls get ready for school, gave Maris a quick goodbye peck, same old routine, no arguments, no weird vibes, zilch. So this idea? It blindsided me like a truck out of nowhere. I pressed her for more details about this whole LT deal and where she even heard about it. Turns out, she's been spending a bunch of time with this friend, Darcy, from her yoga class, some self-styled relationship guru, who's been through 5 divorces and apparently has all the answers. Yep, you heard me right, 5 divorces, and somehow Maris thinks this Darcy chick is a genius at marriage advice. I mean, doesn't that just scream expert in crashing and burning relationships? Still, I managed to keep my cool, and I'm pretty darn proud of myself for that. Truth is, I took a long, deep breath, set my phone aside, and tried to have a real grown-up talk about this whole mess. I looked at Maris and asked what sparked this wild idea. Had I messed up somehow, Or were there issues flying under my radar? You know, I was aiming to be that level-headed husband who actually communicates, but man, her answer blew me away. She just plopped down like we were debating a new cable plan or something, all calm and casual. She told me she needed some breathing room, a chance to grow as a person, and started tossing out these fancy buzzwords that sounded ripped straight from one of those self-help books Darcy probably shoved in her hands. Maris went on about how living apart together is the hot new trend in marriages, claiming all these fancy European couples are jumping on board, like what works in some Swedish village should totally fly in our little Ohio suburb. The real kicker, though? She had the guts to say we could just move back in together if it didn't pan out. Like our marriage and family were some kind of test drive app we could uninstall if it glitched. Not a big deal, right? The whole time she's rambling, I'm just sitting there, my mind stuck on our girls. How do you break it to an 8-year-old that mom and dad are still married but don't want to share a house anymore? Good luck making that add up. That night, sleep was a no-go. My brain was buzzing like a beehive. Maris has never been the type to buy into stuff like this before. Back when we'd joke about things like open marriages, usually over a couple beers with friends, she'd always shoot it down fast, saying it was too out there, not her style. She'd even scoff at couples who tried those trendy setups, rolling her eyes like they were nuts. So what flipped the switch? Was I dropping the ball somewhere? Had I missed a sign? I kept rewinding the last few months in my head, searching for the moment things went sideways, but I could have sworn she was content. Lately, she'd been perkier, more alive, buzzing with energy, and if I had to guess when that kicked in, it lined up with her getting tight with Evan. Since then, it's like I've been sharing the house with a whole new Maris. After she dropped that LAT bombshell, I did what any sane guy would do. I stayed up half the night, stress-eating the kids' leftover Halloween candy while Googling everything I could about living apart together. Here's what I dug up. It's actually kind of fascinating. This LAT thing isn't total nonsense. Some folks pull it off. But get this. It's usually older couples whose kids are grown or people stuck working in different towns, not a couple like us with 2 little ones in grade school, living 10 minutes apart in the same suburb. Red flag number 413. Anyone? Still, I figured I'd roll with it. You know that old saying about giving someone enough rope to hang themselves? That was my game plan. So the next morning, I sat Maris down and said, all right, let's hash out how this would actually play out. I had my laptop fired up, Google ready to roll, taking notes like we were in some corporate strategy session. The look on her face when I brought up formal custody schedules? Absolute gold. She clearly thought this was going to be some chill, you do you, I do me vibe. I laid it out. We'll need a solid plan for the kids, maybe a week with me, a week with you, or a 2 to 3 split. Her jaw practically hit the floor, pure shock written all over her. And we've got to nail down rules for holidays and birthdays, I added. Probably smart to loop in lawyers, too, so it's all official and clear down the road. She blinked at me and stammered, lawyers? I figured we'd just wing it as we went. That's when I hit her with the big one. My cousin Eva's a family lawyer, and at last year's Christmas party, after a few too many eggnogs, she'd offered to rep me for free if I ever needed it. Shout out to Tipsy Eva. Maris's face was a sight to behold, and she instantly started yapping about some lawyer she knows through Darcy. Yep, the guy who handled all 4 of Darcy's divorces. Shocker, right? But here's where it gets juicy. I started firing off super specific questions about this grand plan of hers. Who's footing the bill for a second place? How are we divvying up the utilities and groceries? What about getting the kids to school? Who's got the dog on which days? What happens if one of the girls gets sick in the middle of the night? How do we split parent-teacher conferences or the girls' soccer practices? With every question, she squirmed a little more, pretty sure this wasn't the dreamy setup Darcy painted for her. The cherry on top? I whipped out this spreadsheet I'd thrown together at 3 a.m., breaking down exactly what it'd cost to run 2 households. Rent, electric bills, food, insurance, the works. I even tossed in a column for dating expenses, because, hey, if we're living apart, might as well keep it real, right? You could see the exact second it sank in for her. This wasn't shaping up to be some cute little, independent lady fantasy like in those rom-coms Darcy probably made her binge. This wasn't some breezy daydream, it was real life, packed with real duties and real fallout. Then I popped the big question that had been nagging at me. So, what neighborhood are you picturing yourself moving to? The way she froze up before answering sent alarm bells clanging in my skull. After a beat, she tried to play it cool and mumbled something about checking out the Oak Valley apartments. For anyone who doesn't know, Oak Valley's this swanky complex clear across town, way pricier than anything I'd crunched into my spreadsheet. I cut the talk short right there, told her we'd figure out the rest later. Now, I'm no genius, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't adding up. Why that spot, of all places? It's a solid 30-minute haul from the girls' school, there's no playground in sight, and most of the units are one-bedrooms, hardly the setup for someone planning to host 2 kids half the time. So, I went into full-on detective mode, call it paranoia if you want. I've got this buddy from work, Nolan, whose sister works in the leasing office at Oak Valley, so I shot him a quick text to see if he could dig up some dirt. Yeah, it's a little shady, I'll admit, but I was desperate, okay? And guess who's got a place at Oak Valley? None other than Maris's office hotshot, the regional manager she's name-dropped a million times lately, Mr. Corporate Synergy himself, Evan. At first, I wondered if she was just jealous of his ritzy address and wanted a taste of it too. But then she threw me for a loop. When I mentioned setting up a room for the girls at her new digs, Maris got all squirrely, started fumbling with excuses like, maybe we should hold off until I'm settled, and the kids might get mixed up at first. Then she hit me with this doozy. Maybe they should just stay with you most of the time until we sort everything out. Because nothing screams, great mom, like choosing to see your kids less just so you can shack up in a one-bedroom near your totally just a coworker boss. I didn't call her out on Evan right then. I wanted more ammo first. So I rang up her sister, Celeste. Now, Celeste and I have always clicked, maybe a tad too much if I'm being real. Ever since her divorce last year, she's been a little flirty, nothing wild, just enough to catch my eye. One time, she even tossed out, if my sister hadn't snagged you first. I brushed it off with a laugh, never fed into it, because, I'm married. Celeste was floored when I spilled the LT news, but then she started connecting the dots. She told me Maris has been hitting her with all these what-if questions lately, like, how soon is too soon to date after splitting? And is it odd to go out with someone from work? My favorite? How do you break it to the kids that you're seeing somebody new? Then Celeste dropped the real bomb. Maris has been grilling her about Evan, his schedule, what floor he's on, if he's got a girlfriend, pretty much everything short of his shoe size and favorite cereal. She thought she was slick about it, apparently. I felt sick to my stomach. All these years together, and now she's pitching me this trendy buzzword like it's some clever shortcut, like our marriage is just a guinea pig for her latest self-help fad. That night, I hid out in the garage, pretending to tinker with stuff. Really, I was hammering my punching bag until my knuckles ached and my jaw was locked so tight my teeth hurt. Every time I pictured her sitting me down, all calm and collected like she'd already made up her mind, I saw red. Later, I found out that while I was out there trying to keep my head from exploding, Maris was inside yapping with Darcy on the phone for 90 minutes, probably soaking up more expert tips on how to dismantle a marriage in record time. Deep down, I knew we were toast. The trust was already in pieces, but I wasn't about to let her call all the shots. Come morning, I started scoping out apartments too, but I went in the opposite direction, checking spots near Celeste's neighborhood, miles away from Oak Valley. I dropped it on Maris real casual like over breakfast. So, I've been browsing some apartments myself, I said, scrolling through listings on my phone. She barely glanced up from her coffee. Oh, cool. Where at? She mumbled. A few places near Celeste's area, I replied, and boom, her head jerked up like I'd set off a firecracker. Hold up. What? She snapped. That's not fair to the girls. If we're too far apart, it'll mess with them. I set my mug down slow, locked eyes with her, and just stared. Suddenly, she's all about what's fair for the kids? Maris blinked at me, caught off guard, like she never saw me clapping back coming. The nerve of this lady, I kid you not. She opened her mouth to argue, then clamped it shut and huffed out this irritated little sigh. That's not what I was getting at, she grumbled. You're just trying to make this harder on purpose. I leaned back in my chair, let out a quick chuckle, and gave my head a shake. Oh, no, Maris, I said. I'm having way too much fun with this. Her eyes squinted into slits. What's that supposed to mean? She shot back. I didn't bother answering, just brushed by her and strolled off. And just when I thought my frustration had hit its peak, Maris found a way to crank it up even higher. That night, I wasn't even trying to snoop, but as I passed by the bedroom, I caught her on the phone, chatting way too breezily about something that made my blood simmer. Yeah, I think it'll be good for us, she was saying. It'll give me a chance to hit reset, focus on me for once, And honestly, I bet Aldric will warm up to it once he sees how smooth things run this way, less tension, fewer spats. He might even like it better. Excuse me, like it better? Then she let out this little giggle, like our whole family getting flipped upside down was just some cute lifestyle tweak, not a wrecking ball smashing through everything we built. I stood there, fists balled up, letting it sink in. She genuinely thought I'd just nod along like some clueless pushover, happy to let her rewrite our life to suit her whims. That's when I figured it was time to lob my own curveball, and man, it landed way better than I'd hoped. We were parked at the kitchen table later, hashing out more of this living apart together nonsense. Maris was acting all high and mighty, going on about how grown up we were being. So I picked my moment and dropped it, cool as can be. Oh, hey, by the way, I could use your take on something. Should I try to get my money back for those Florida tickets, or just swap the names on them? A little backstory, Maris has been downright nuts about Florida forever, like borderline obsessed. She's glued to all these Florida vacation pages on Instagram, has a whole Pinterest board stacked with beach pics, the full deal. But we've never made it happen. The girls were too little, work wouldn't budge, cash was short, life. So there I am, sipping my coffee, playing it casual, and her head whipped up so fast I'm pretty sure she tweaked her neck. What Florida tickets, she stammered, trying to sound chill and missing by a mile. That's when I laid it out, the surprise anniversary trip I'd booked for us. 5 days, a beachfront hotel, the whole shebang, even lined up her folks to watch the kids. They don't know about this LT chaos yet. That's a separate headache I'm still bracing for. Her face was a show all on its own. First this flicker of glee, then a wave of confusion, and finally this weird mashup of hope and dread, like a kid hearing they're headed to Disney but also remembering they're stuck in timeout. You booked a Florida trip for us? She whispered, barely audible. Well, I set it up for us back when there was still an us, I said, keeping my tone even. But since you're all in on this LT thing, I figured you might want to bring somebody else along. Tickets are paid for, non-refundable, hate to see him go to waste. She backpedaled so quick I half expected her to break into a moonwalk. Maybe we should pump the brakes on the LT idea, she blurted out. This trip could be a chance to patch things up. And that's when I unleashed the second surprise. Actually, I said, I already got in touch with the travel agent and switched your ticket to transferable. You can bring whoever you want. Maybe Evan could use a little beach getaway. The color just drained from Maris's face. She went pale as a ghost. She started tripping over her words, insisting Evan was just a coworker and wondering why I'd even throw his name out there. I gave a lazy shrug and said, well, since you're set on moving into his building, I figured you two must be pretty tight, then moseyed over to grab more coffee like I hadn't just flipped our whole chat upside down. She trailed me around the kitchen, scrambling to convince me I'd misread everything, that Oak Valley was just a nice spot, and Evan living there was pure chance. Then she threw this at me. Wait, how do you even know Evan lives there? Have you been snooping on me? I turned, locked eyes with her, and said, funny how you're more hung up on how I found out where Evan lives than on the fact you were planning to move near him without mentioning it to me. She went quiet, didn't have a comeback, but I could see her eyes getting shiny, like she was about to crack. Before she bolted out of the room, I just stood there, stewing in disgust. After that Florida ticket bombshell, I'd half hoped Maris might fess up to the whole mess. Dumb me, right? Instead, she kicked into damage control overdrive, not the kind where you actually mend things, but the kind where you twist everything to paint yourself as the wounded party. First stop? Darcy, naturally. They had this marathon 2.5-hour phone sesh where I could hear Maris bawling through the walls, whining about how I was emotionally manipulating her by, get this, calling out her scheme to ditch her kids and cozy up near her boss. The mental acrobatics those two pulled could have landed them gold at the Olympics, I'm telling you. But here's where the plot thickens. You remember Nolan, my work pal with the sister at Oak Valley's leasing office? Turns out Evan has been up to some sketchy stuff too. Word around the office, thank you, chatty receptionists, says he's been boasting to his work crew about this hot mom from accounting who's totally smitten with him. Guess who's in accounting? Yep, Maris. And the kicker? Evan has a serious girlfriend. Like, shopping for rings serious. She's clueless about all this, according to Nolan's sister, who handled their lease renewal last month. They're shacked up together at Oak Valley. So now I'm sitting on this dynamite info, wrestling with what to do next. Part of me wants to light the fuse, spill it to Evan's girlfriend, tip off HR, shout it from the rooftops. But the sharper side of me, which sounds a lot like my cousin Eva the lawyer, says to hold off, keep stacking evidence, and stay cool-headed. Speaking of Eva, she's been a rock star. Don't ask me how, but she worked some legal magic and snagged a copy of Maris's Oak Valley rental application. Get this, Maris listed herself as single. Not separated, not married, single. And for her emergency contact? Not her husband, or the father of her kids, Evan. Meanwhile, Maris is still trying to straddle both worlds. One second she's all, let's save our marriage. The next she's firing off texts to Evan. Yeah, I caught those popping up on her iPad. She really oughta ditch using our anniversary as her password. It's like watching someone juggle with butterfingers. Then there's Celeste. After the Florida ticket fiasco, she's been texting me more. Just checking in to see how I'm holding up. Nothing shady, pure support. But Maris spotted one of those messages flash on my phone while I was cooking dinner. Hope you're doing okay. Hit me up if you need to vent, and lost it. Here's how it went down. Why's my sister texting you? Maris snapped. Because, unlike some folks, she actually gives a darn about family. I fired back. She's always had a crush on you, Maris said. You two are probably eating this up. I raised an eyebrow and said, funny how you're more freaked out about Celeste texting me than about Evan's girlfriend finding out about your little apartment scheme. Evan has nothing to do with this. What girlfriend? She sputtered, and then she completely unraveled. She started pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, hands raking through her hair, muttering about how this wasn't supposed to go like this. Then she just broke, slid down the cabinet to the floor and started sobbing. You're gonna leave me for Celeste, aren't you? She choked out between gasps. That's why you're moving near her. You two probably cooked this up together. I stood there for a minute, staring down at her, thinking back to when everything was good, before she torched it all. You know what's hilarious? I finally said, propping myself against the counter. You're down there bawling about me maybe leaving you for your sister, which, by the way, isn't even a thing, while you're literally plotting to move into your boss's apartment complex. The mental backflips you're pulling here could win you a gold medal. She lifted her head, mascara streaking down her cheeks like a bad watercolor. It wasn't like that, she mumbled. I wasn't. I just felt trapped, like life was slipping away, and Evan, he made me feel. Whoa, hold it right there. I cut in, stopping her cold. If the next thing you say is how your charming boss made you feel all warm and fuzzy while I was out here keeping our family afloat and raising our girls, I might actually lose my cool. That sparked a fresh flood of tears, and she whispered, I never meant to hurt you, or the girls. Oh, man, the girls, she gasped. What have I done? I leveled my gaze at her. Here's the thing, Maris, you didn't mean to hurt us. Maybe you didn't sit down and plan it out loud, but every move you made, the LT pitch, the apartment near Evan, slapping his name as your emergency contact, calling yourself single, those were deliberate steps. You chose them, knowing full well they'd rip our family apart. She just sat there, sobbing into her hands, and honestly, it didn't feel as good as I'd imagined. I thought seeing her break might lift some weight off me, but it didn't. It just left me hollow. Sad for our kids, sad for what we used to be, sad that she'd tossed it all for some pipe dream that was doomed from the jump. Then she hit me with something so wild I couldn't help but laugh out loud. But Darcy said this was normal. She told me all marriages hit this wall, and LT would fix us. Darcy, I said, incredulous. You mean the lady who's racked up 5 divorces? That Darcy? Yeah, she's a real guru when it comes to keeping a marriage alive. Maris whispered, almost to herself, I'm so stupid. Nah, I sighed, you're not stupid, you're selfish. Big difference. She looked up at me with those big, watery eyes and pleaded, can we fix this? Please? I'll do anything, quit my job, ditch Darcy, go to therapy, whatever you want. Just don't leave me for Celeste. That's when it hit me, she still didn't get it. She was hung up on me and Celeste, or her and Evan, like this was about some outside drama, not the fact that she'd shattered the core of our marriage the second she started building a secret life that didn't include me or our kids. I'm crashing at Celeste tonight, I said, snagging my keys. Not because anything's going on, but because I need room to breathe and figure out how we're gonna wrap this up. Honestly, looking at you right now just stings too much. I left her there on the kitchen floor, her sobs echoing as I headed out. Didn't glance back, just climbed into my truck and drove off. Ended up staying at Celeste for 2 days, bunking in her spare room before anyone gets ideas. I needed the time to clear the fog in my head and map out what came next. Plus, Cousin Eva, my lawyer ace, wanted to make sure we had everything lined up tight before the big showdown. We decided it was time to lay all the cards on the table for the family, so we set it up at Maris's parents' place. Neutral ground seemed fairest. Besides, they had a right to know why their grandkid's world was about to flip. Maris tried to dodge it, claiming she was too wrecked to face everyone. I told her she could either show up willing, or I'd let Eva kick off the divorce process without her say-so. She showed. Walking in felt like stepping into a dream. Maris's mom had brewed coffee and set out those homemade cookies she always makes for family gatherings, like this was just another cozy Sunday, not the day their daughter's marriage went down in flames. Eva came armed with the works. Copies of the Oak Valley application where Maris marked herself as single, screenshots of her flirty text with Evan, bank records showing she'd been funneling cash into a secret account. It was all spread out on the dining room table like a messed-up scrapbook of deceit. Maris's mom started tearing up when she saw that rental app. Her dad just sat there, getting quieter with every piece Eva walked through, his silence heavier than any words. The divorce wrapped up 2 months back. Maris is living with her folks now after the Evan mess blew sky high. Turns out his girlfriend stormed into Maris's office with a stack of their text messages. Guess I wasn't the only one peeking at screens. The whole staff got a front row seat as Maris fumbled to explain why she was planning to move into their building with Evan listed as her emergency contact. It was almost comical watching Maris squirm as she tried to justify why she'd planned to move into Evan's apartment complex with his name penciled in as her emergency contact. HR didn't find it so funny. They stepped in, and both she and Evan got the boot from their jobs. Darcy got her comeuppance too, and man, did she deserve it. Turns out I wasn't the only fed-up husband sick of her so-called modern relationship wisdom. Life's got a funny way of sorting itself out sometimes. A year back, when Maris first pitched that whole LET craziness, I genuinely thought my life was crumbling. Now, I've got my girls, a solid job I love, and, get this, I'm with someone who's been in my corner all along, quietly watching me step up as a dad and husband while her sister treated it like pocket change. Yep, Celeste and I are a thing now. No, we didn't scheme it out beforehand, and yeah, we get that it's a little tangled. But after seeing Maris nearly torch our family for some dude who had a girlfriend and didn't even want her in the end, it felt like a breath of fresh air to realize I had a spark with someone who already adored my kids and knew what family's really worth. Sometimes the garbage hauls itself to the curb. You've heard that saying about karma, right? It bides its time, but it's got a memory like a steel trap, never misses a stop.